Welcome, friends. This lodge passes on the path to truth and the ancient message of the wisdom of the ages as it was brought to us by H.P. Blavatsky and her staunch colleague William Q. Judge after it was restored to its original lines by Robert Crosby. This message in action has always been before us within the laws of nature. The teachings have a way of losing their purity through human interpretations. The most comprehensive and tested message of philosophy, science, and religion, which we are aware of, is that which follows the lines laid down in the original teachings as left to us by Madame Blavatsky under the direction of the Masters of Wisdom. HBB said nothing she presented was original except for the nosegay of ribbon used to tie the teachings together. She said she showed the path to perfection, but we must assimilate this message into our daily lives and live it. We're going to have a reading of the declaration of this law and a reading from a devotional teaching. Then we're going to have the talk on sacrifice, rain, and drought. Next week we will be in cycles, having a presentation on that.
Good morning. The United Lodge of Theosophists Declaration states the following. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of theosophy without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy, and the exemplification and practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes, and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading comes from the Bhagavad Gita. A man enjoyeth not freedom from action, from the non-commencement of that which he hath to do, nor doth he obtain happiness from a total abandonment of action. No one ever rested a moment inactive. Every man is involuntarily urged to act by the qualities which spring from nature. He who remains inert, restraining the senses and organs, yet pondering with his heart upon objects of sense, is called a false pietist, of bewildered soul. But he who, having subdued all his passions, performeth with his active faculties all the duties of life, unconcerned as to their result, is to be esteemed. Do thou perform the proper actions. Action is superior to inaction. The journey of thy mortal frame cannot be accomplished by inaction. All actions performed other than as sacrifice unto God make the actor bound by action. Abandon then, O son of Kunti, all selfish motives. and in action perform thy duty for him alone. When, in ancient times, the Lord of creatures had formed mankind, and at the same time appointed his worship, he spoke and said, with this worship pray for increase, and let it be for you Kamaduk, the cow of plenty, on which ye shall depend for the accomplishment of all your wishes. With this nourish the gods, that the gods may nourish you. Thus mutually nourishing ye shall obtain the highest felicity. The gods being nourished by worship with sacrifice will grant you the enjoyment of your wishes. He who enjoyeth what hath been given unto him by them, and offereth not a portion unto them, is even as a thief. But those who eat not but what is left of the offerings shall be purified of all their transgressions. Those who dress their meat but for themselves eat the bread of sin, being themselves sin incarnate. Beings are nourished by food. Food is produced by rain. Rain comes from sacrifice, and sacrifice is performed by action. Know that action comes from the Supreme Spirit, who is one, wherefore the all-pervading Spirit is at all times present in the sacrifice. And now for today's talk.
Good morning and welcome everyone. Today's talk is on sacrifice, rain and drought. And you'll have to please forgive me, my throat is very ticklish. First of all, I think we should define what sacrifice is, because it has been changed. The meaning of sacrifice has been changed. It ordinarily meant to make sacred. We should put it here. To make sacred. But a lot of people would not give that connotation to it. And it states that through the degeneration of the mysteries and occult schools, it gave it a different meaning. And it sort of degenerated into bargaining. To bargaining. No. In Theosophy, then, these words have deep meaning, and it is underlying truth, and we need to live the life in order to understand what it really means to sacrifice. So, if we make it personal, something that we value personally, then that bargaining comes into it, because then we're going to replace it with something that is bargained for and means more to us than otherwise. So what does it mean to make sacred? It is putting one thing in place of another. So in other words, it's a reduction of the simplest term that we can get. What is it that we are substituting with? It states to substitute the altruistic for the selfish, the calm for the impatient, rout out jealousy, envy, and any malicious feeling we have, and clearly put its opposite in its place. In other words, the technique is to actually do it and see how that equilibrium brings us closer to nature. The movement, this movement, the Theosophical movement, came about in order to uplift the mind of the race. And not the smallest effort can be discounted in that direction. In other words, we're trying to change the psychic to the spiritual, and in our everyday human ways, we're applying it. This, it states, eventually becomes a necessity for that bridge to be established. What is the bridge? Well, in these writings, it is called Buddhimanas, and perhaps we should say what that is. We all have an intellectual mind, and this intellectual mind we use every single day for our everyday work and going places, doing our accounting and so forth. But in this philosophy, there's also a divine mind which is higher than the intellectual mind. Most of us do not give that definition to the mind, but it is nevertheless, it works in two different ways, mind. And so we stay with our intellectual mind. What this article is explaining to us is that in order to bring the divine mind into activity, we have to appeal to it, because at this time it does not really work. It is kind of dormant, it's there, but we don't acknowledge it. So Buddhi is our spiritual soul, and with that divine mind in conjunction, it brings about the change for humanity, which is going to be, in the future generations, a necessity for us to go forward. Now, when this philosophy was brought out in the 19th century, there are several articles that was written. One of them was about having pity for nature, that we were using it without paying any attention to what we were doing. In other words, we were cutting the trees down. She gave us a statement that became true. She said that the Chinese were cutting the trees down all along the river banks, and that she was telling us would change the direction of the rains. And this is true. What has become, in those areas, there's tremendous drought because the rains do not fall in the same direction that they used to fall before all the trees were chopped down. Now, she also told us that the same was happening to us in the United States on the Pacific coast. And if you look at California today, we see that happening to them too, because drought is definitely there. Their water levels are very low. Rains do not fall in the same directions that they used to fall. We were warned not to do it, but we went ahead and did it anyway. So, when we look at the writings of Manu, which is the lawgiver, the Bhagavad Gita, which is a discussion between the higher and the lower self, giving direction as to what we should be doing, and then Pythagoras' writings, Neoplatonists, Paracelsus, H.P.B. and Judge, we find these statements. This is from Life of Pythagoras by Iamblichus. And in the first place, indeed, they endeavor to learn the indications of symmetry, of labor, food, and repose. In the next place, with respect to the preparation of food, they were nearly the first who attempted to employ themselves in it and to define the mode in which it should be performed. So now we know food is necessary, but here it says how it should be prepared is also very necessary. Do we understand its significance and what has happened to us in this century? We are not in the 19th, we have already lived through 100 years, now we're in the 21st century. What has happened to our food? Its DNA has been modified. It is stated that food will be grown, but that it would not have all of the nutrients necessary to support our lives. Who's doing this change? Well, industry, obviously. Most people are not quite aware as to what is really going on around us. We just go to the market, get our food, come home, fix it, or we go to these fast food chains and we get our food from them. It is not beneficent to health. This change is not beneficent to health. Do we know what the modification is doing to the food, for instance? And in psychology, we are all told that our feelings at the table when we're eating the food has something to do with its assimilation, in other words, digestion. So, it says here, man was considered a macrocosm, and every element in him was supposed to come from a similar element in nature. Who of us is aware of this fact, that we are exactly the same as the nature around us, and that what constitutes our universe is in us? It says here, from his body innumerable forms go forth, our body, which constantly impel the multiform creatures to action. This comes from Laws of Manu. The Demiurgos, the creative energy, does not by any means set food abundant and enrich for all living things in the earth and sea, but has implanted want of the same in the races superior to us, nor has he furnished to the other living things a natural abundance of the necessaries of life, but to the elementals, he gives food of a quantity adopted to their nature, which is contributed by us human beings. Hence, if we, through laziness or some other pretext, should neglect our contributions, the bodies of those things that we are contributing to will diminish, and they will not be able to support life, because then they become disordered. That's an H. Distorted. They can't support life. And this from Life of Paracelsus by Hartmann. There is something like a fire, an energy within ourselves, which continuously consumes our form. And if we were not to add anything to our body, through this combustion, our bodies would soon die, because it would not be able to retain its shape. So, each part of our organism selects what it needs, and that which is left over is rejected. The master in man, who superintends the building up of the organism, supplies every organ with what is needed. So, who's aware of the master? Who's the master in man? We should ask this question to ourselves. And this one from the Gita. This is Krishna conversing with Arjuna. One is the higher, the other lower. I enter the earth, supporting all living things by my power, and I am that property of sap, which is taste, nourishing all the herbs and plants of the field. Becoming the internal fire of the living, I associate with the outward and downward breathing, and cause the 4 kinds of food to digest. I'm talking about the master in the body. Now, we go to the secret doctrine. The gigantic unbroken wall of the mountains that hem in the whole tableland of Tibet, from the upper course of the river Quan Khe down to the Karakorum Hills, witnessed a civilization during millenniums of years and would have a strange secret to tell mankind. A whole geological period has swept over the land since those cities breathed their last. The oasis of Techer Chan, for instance, is surrounded with the ruins of archaic towns and cities in every direction. There, 3,000 human beings represent the relics of about 100 extinct nations and races, names of which is unknown to us today. So, the question being asked is, why the greedy sands has licked up the flowing waters of human life in so many parts of the planet? Excuse me. If we go to the Gobi Desert, this is where this article is referring to, Mongolistan, China, and those areas. We go to the Sahara, then we are going to the North Africa. It starts all the way from the Atlantic and goes all the way into the Nile Delta. So it carries all across northern Africa from different countries. And it is barren. It is sand. Why? What about our own land? What about the Great Southwest, for instance? HPB tells us that correlation of lost races with desert areas is one of the most fundamental aspects of Earth. Nor in any of these cases have geologists been able to point out topographic changes sufficiently recent to show a logical cause of the stripping and desiccation. And then she tells us deserts are man-made. Are man-made. And she tells us that what has happened to the Great Basin of Mississippi is also by men. In other words, we are the ones who are affecting our environment. And the suffering, drought, and downpour of rain in very large quantities that actually sweep certain areas are man-made. We have to look backwards because this problem was addressed in the 1875 onward, 1930 onward, and it has not been addressed. We're still going about our business as usual without paying any attention to which areas we are denuding, what fields we are destroying. When you look at California, what they had said in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s have actually come to be true, because they have mudslides, they have removed all of the trees from the slopes, they have gotten rid of the fields, and they're suffering tremendous loss. And this is our own home here in the United States. Mississippi Basin is the other one, and that also has come true. And they did tell us to be careful as to what we were cutting down. HPB has an article called Trees. She considers trees a sign of healthy living, healthy living, a civilization that is promoting well-being. What is our 21st century civilization doing in this direction? We really have to ask these questions. Is our environment health-giving or is it destructive? She told us that Mississippi Basin was going to suffer just like the sorrow of Chinese men and women in the region of the tree cutting business that was going on in China. And then she tells us that the Sahara, and with her forgotten history, is being investigated as to why it is that way. But she tells us that we have been exposed to the Atlantean colonization in the secret doctrine, and we need to know that this is the cause of it. For newcomers, this is a very strange topic to talk about today, because I'm not sure if you're all interested or have been introduced to these different terms that we use here. Atlanteans, according to the secret doctrine, formulates the fourth race. We are the fifth sub of the fifth root. We're the Aryan race. So it's a bit funny to be talking about all these past events. Aryan race. We are the fifth sub-race of fifth root. She says that at that time, in historical events as they were recorded, they were not called Atlanteans, but she says for our purposes in the secret doctrine, she's going to use that term, Atlanteans. So Atlanteans. But if you read Ocean of Theosophy, Mr. Judge is telling us that we are the Atlanteans as the mind field opens up, freedom of thought is again being permitted in the West. She says that the Atlanteans are reincarnating in the West. So who are the Atlanteans? We are the Atlanteans. Even though today, we formulate the Aryan race, in the past we also formulated the Atlantean race. This race sank. Because they were doing ugly things to all the nations around them without any disregard to their activity. They were getting rid of those pieces of land. So that's what that is. And denudation or stripping of those areas is due to Atlantean colonization. Now, how then is this dilemma going to be addressed and sorted out and moved in the right direction? Without sacrifice, it cannot be done. Why? Because, as we heard, even when it comes to food, it isn't given to everybody equally. It's not distributed evenly. And why should we be concerned about it? According to the secret doctrine and all of the writings in all of the religious books, we constitute one people. In other words, humanity is one family. Constitutes one family. And different nations are all different branches of this family. United States is one of the, used to be actually, because it's still, even if you consider it economically advanced, it is on its down cycle. And look at it from this perspective and you'll perceive it. When this country was formulated, when this great democratic system came about, the writers of our independence said that the scenery opening out in the United States was for all people, not just for the people who were here, but that opening out was for all people. In other words, United States was going to become an example to the world as to how we should live, as to how we should help one another, as to how we should protect the democratic system. Well, are we doing this today? Are we the protectors of the democratic system? Is this great republic what our forefathers had made of it? Is it the same today? Are we concerned about the welfare of other peoples in other countries? Do we consider them our brothers and sisters? Do we consider all of the people in the United States our brothers and sisters? In other words, what is the cycle's thinking? What is the ideology of the cycle? Of the cycle. So, how do we answer these questions? Are there replies? Are there solutions? And it says yes. And she tells us that. And we're going to finish it with this. She tells us, it is a fact that no terrain ever fell into desert while its people were yet led by duty, by honor, by regard for fellow men. China's deserts grew apace as the pure doctrines of Lao Tse were corrupted into the false priest-ridden Taoism of today, and private merchandising were substituted for racial duty, and universal corruption in government replaced the political practices inculcated by Confucius as well as Lao Tse. And the archetype of luxurious court was originated by Nebuchadnezzar. And this was a Babylonian king, 562 BC, and it carried forward to the 20th century, and we're now in the 21st. So, it said that that is what ushered in the denudation of Babylonian hills and overwhelming of her cities under tides of sand and mud. So the Sahara, the Gobi, also is due to exactly the same events. When we take more than what is necessary from nature, she asks us to consider, what will nature do to us? What will nature do to us if we don't treat her with respect, with loving kindness, when taking what we need from it and we exhaust it? What is it going to do to us? Now we will open it for questions. Yeah?
It seems like we maybe don't see all of this, or even a small snapshot of it, because our so-called ancient history doesn't go back nearly as far as what you presented today, number one. And number two, we have natural occurrences anyway, and it's hard to separate out the terrible damage we're doing. And there are a lot of people that I think more people are seeing it today. We're hearing about much more about the environment now, and it's a much larger concern in the political arena. So, just a comment. food for thought and discussion.
Well, we're also intelligent people. Our intelligence is very high. We have now grown out of our childhood, and we need to be concerned. We need to show that we understand the issues that are going on in our lives, because if we cannot put our own lives in order, how are we supposed to be helping other nations around the world? We kind of look down on people who are economically not as advanced as we are today. But according to HPB's writings, she says that every nation has a different gift to contribute to the total welfare of humanity. It's not always economics. That they might have other qualities that are just as necessary for going forward as economic success. Are we an economic success is what we should also ask.
So I guess we're under an illusion too. Like I was thinking about that song, Thoroughly Modern Millie, of the 50s and 60s and so forth. And the Lankeans, while I read about them, they were far more advanced than we seem to be today. But you said they sank because they were able to use the mind to manipulate their planes and boats and things like that.
Yeah. Well, we also have a great mind. Humanity has grown, and we do use our mind in gaining advantage over other nations, and that is not what it is supposed to be doing. We're to be using our mind in conjunction with other nations in solving our universal problems. Yeah.
Touching on the same comments as Herb, knowing that or learning about the Atlanteans, that they sank, perhaps the same events are not occurring for that to happen nowadays in the fifth race of the fifth race, root race. Aren't the cycles unstoppable? Aren't they going to happen anyways? What happens to the Atlanteans? They were extinguished, and I know the souls continue, but reincarnated in today's soup race. But I mean, what's going to happen to nature isn't going to happen anyway. Although there are concerns, but not enough to save nature.
So you're saying that what we do to nature is not important because it's going to happen anyway?
I'm not saying it's not important. I'm saying, looking historically at what happens to Atlanteans, aren't the cycles going to happen anyway? I'm not saying it's not important.
Cycles happen, but what we do within the cycle, we determine ourselves. Other people are not determining it for us. We are determining it. Okay, what is the cycle? What is the cycle we're talking about? This cycle is Kali Yuga. This is the Dark Age. According to the division of the Dendera's calendar and what is presented, we are not talking about small periods of time. We're talking about extensive periods of time. The Kali Yuga has 400,000 odd years in it. We had only spent 5,000 years of this cycle when these books were written. So what are we going to be doing in the 400,000 years is the question here. You're saying that cycles come. Of course they come. But are the cycles all pre-written as to what we're going to experience and what's going to happen in it? Absolutely not. It depends on human beings as to what's going to happen to us. And that's a very negative attitude, to say that we cannot make a change to bring about a better age within it. Because Kali Yuga is a very fast age, and regardless of what happens, the age is going to run through, just like it did before. But Atlanteans did not complete this cycle. They sank into the Atlantic Ocean. Why? Because they were doing manipulation that was not in the best interest of humanity. They were getting rid of sections of people. What exactly are we doing? You know, the war effort all the time is telling us that it's our safety that is at stake here. We go and fight people in the Middle East. We go and fight people in Afghanistan. We go and fight people in different areas of the world. And are we really doing benefit to them? Or are we damaging those areas, is what we need to ask. Is our welfare more important than anybody else's? If we are part of humanity, what we are doing doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what name we give it. Are we killing people or are we giving life, is what we need to really ask. And we are intelligent human beings. We make decisions every single day to prolong life, to be healthier, to raise our children in a safe environment. Are our children really being raised in a safe environment? Are our schools safe? When this student was growing up, there was no shooting in any school that I'm aware of. That we went to school to learn. We were safe. Nobody came to kill. What has changed in the environment is what we need to ask. We're the ones who are leaving this inheritance to our children. We're not sorting it out. We're going to expect them to do the work that we are refusing to do for them. See, I'm standing here and taking the negative side of events. We need to look at it and sort it out.
We do have plenty of positive examples.
Of course we do.
You know, the young child from Canada, I believe, who was influential in getting wells drilled in Africa.
Correct.
Etc. That's quite a bit. The person that you talk about a good bit about, he went to South America and found out that children were getting diseases from bare feet, and he came back to this country and established a company to make shoes, and he made a pair of shoes here and sold them, and from the profit he sold he sent that shoes.
He donates one pair for every pair he sells here. He donates one pair to those kids that don't have any shoes in Brazil or wherever they were, Argentina. I'm not sure where they were, but yes, the reason it is presented this way is that we need to think about what we are doing. We cannot just blindfoldedly go along with anything that is happening in our environment. It is that kind of environment where we have to make a choice where we want to make a difference. It's our responsibility to do so, because sacrifice means replacing something with something else. That something else is going to be a better solution that we're replacing the older one with. That's what it is referring to here. Why otherwise would it be sacrifice? Because we are giving up something to make a better change for others.
But why am I responsible for the Trail of Tears that occurred? The World War II, I wasn't even, I was just a baby toward the end of World War II.
And who were responsible? Aren't we part of humanity? If we're one family, who's responsible? We come and go. This philosophy does not make any sense if we don't accept coming and going. Just like...
So you talk about reincarnation and
yeah,
talking about that?
The law. What's the law? Karma. Just like we go to sleep at night. We rest, we wake up. Do we know where we were? No. It's the same thing with reincarnation. At the end of life, this body drops. But the inner principles of man, the spiritual aspect of us, is permanent. It is immortal. It goes from life to life to life and experiences life. It gains experience in order to make better choices, make the environment better, raise children that are beneficent to human life as well as all of the other kingdoms of nature. So it is necessary that those who understand make the change, become exemplars of a good living style for others to follow. Yes?
If this path is so straightforward and laid out, why are so few of us here today to deal with it?
Because it requires work. A lot of people tell me, we went to the library and gave a talk, and people approached and said, but the things that you're asking humanity to do require work. I don't want to do any work. She said, I don't want to work. I said, well, that's also our choice, isn't it? Here it said you can be an idle human being and refuse to participate in the solution. But what is it going to happen to you?
Yeah, many people want to be free riders.
Sorry?
Many people prefer to be free riders. That's
Free
why
riders.
it's called.
Say it
They said
again.
free riders.
Free riders.
They want the other people.
Someone
to do
else
that
does
for
the
them.
work.
But they're not awake to the inner reality yet, are they? They're asleep. How many people are actually awake? Yes.
So I know, like, sometimes it feels like it's daunting because you feel like you're in such a minority. But I really believe that when you're, like, raising your own vibration or, like, that affects what I would call the main brain or, like, you know, the consciousness that we all tap into. So even though it seems like, even if you're not the kid that's giving the shoes to other people, even if you're just, I don't know, talking to your trees in your backyard or whatever,
Yeah.
like, you're still helping to raise the consciousness of the planet. in
That's
some
What
true.
the philosophy says, I think.
Yeah.
So,
Because she tells us that what we think makes a tremendous difference. Because it is imprinted on the Akashic or astral light. We are not even aware of the astral light. Many people ask me, what exactly is that? But this philosophy says this physical body could not have come into being because it is built on a model body. Ooh, not good writing today. Model body. That model body is made up of electromagnetic substance. And if you ask psychic people, they can see it, that there is an aura around you. They can see it. It's not imaginary, it is real. But the world has one too. Our world has an astral world around it too. And what we give it is imprinted in it. So sometimes she tells us that people say, I was made to do this ugly act. In other words, someone told her or him to do it. Well, who is the someone telling another human being to do something? Because if we have affinity to it, we're going to get from that astral what we really don't know what we're pulling out of it at night in sleep, because it's there. So you're right. What we think positively about influences the whole psychic world around us, uplifts it. If it is good feelings, good mode of approaching life beneficently. Dupree always used to say, if you pull a weed out of your neighbor's yard, that means you're pulling one out of your own too. In other words, your neighbor is part of you as well. So if we think on those terms, you're very right. It does make a tremendous difference as to that positive thinking and what it does to uplift human subconsciousness. Well,
it seems so that, they hold, we operate in cycles in this country and individually and so forth. I think that's what we're going to hear, something like that next week. Uh, we are in America's first cycle now. We're fencing ourselves in and things like that. And this didn't start in this administration. We look at this administration, but it's been going on for a long time.
No, America has been on the down cycle for a while because the Roman Empire took 2,000 years to live through that period that America lived in 200 years. This is Kali Yuga, it's very fast. So the changes we make for the benefit of the all also bring about fast results. And the negative things we do also come back to us. This is like, the law is like throwing a ball. When you throw it, you know it's going to come back to you again. It's going to go hit the wall and come back. So when we do these things, even if we are not aware of what we are doing, its effect comes back to us. In this philosophy, everyone is responsible for themselves. There is no outside force. There's a law, but it is impersonal. It works across the board for you, for me, for everybody that's there. Animal kingdoms, vegetable kingdoms, mineral kingdoms, all those are included in this bag. We're all in it together. Because when you look at the lower life forms, we could not exist without them. We eat vegetables, we eat meat. They support our life. And if we are not beneficent to them, why would they want to support us beneficently? Beneficently. Because what we do to them is a reflection back on us. This student saw a piece of very disturbing news. These cows were being collected to milk, and the people collecting them are actually kicking the cows. These are animals that is going to give us milk for our ice cream and butter and so forth. And they were reported to the authorities for mistreating the animals. So what I'm saying is, or what is being said is, that we do the kind thing willingly rather than it being enforced on us. That we become aware of our activity, our thinking, and do it from that viewpoint. In other words, sacrifice is a mode of living because you understand the outcome of what you're doing and what is going to not just affect you, but everything around you, your family, your community, your nation. And HPB gives the example of the pebble. She says when you throw a pebble into a pond, the pebbles causing activity waves would go all the way to the end of that pond. So it's the same with human activity. It affects everything. If we are one, then it is reasonable that it would affect all of us.
While you're looking at that, it seems like that would cause us to change our way of thinking. As she said, if we did not think our neighbor was going to harm us and do, and so forth, and we would treat our neighbor with respect, 2/3 of our problems would disappear.
That's correct. Yeah. So to answer your question, what we do in this cycle is extremely important because we don't want to sink, do we? Because imagine how much effort goes into raising children. You have raised some, so have we. We have to spoon feed these kids to grow up, to become beneficent human beings. So considering how much energy goes into raising one human soul to adulthood so that they can make beneficent choices, that is tremendous energy is being spent in that direction. We don't want to sink. We want the life to go on. And she tells us that we are now going towards the spirituality. We have come down. Now we are on our outward journey. She's talking about the American continent here. And she says, beware, because if you do not take care of nature, it can shake us off its back very easily. Tsunamis, earthquakes, flooding, drought, all of it is how it responds to our abuses. So, if
Is that also part of that? I think your voice says nature is here for us. for us, for our benefit. Sometimes it's a negative thing. If we don't act right, we get punished for it.
Exactly. All our activity has its effect on us and all of the kingdoms below us. So it is necessary to understand what it is we are doing. I think what was being said is take what is necessary, use wisely. We have become a throwaway society. We're continuously replacing everything. My parents had one fridge. I don't know how many we have gone through. Truly, we have become a throwaway society, and the Japanese are even worse than we are. Every 6 months, they are changing their gadgets. They don't even sit on it for a whole year. They want to get new stuff in. So we need to be aware of what we are doing. Our oceans are suffering from pollution. All those plastic bags they were showing, the Galapagos, I think it was, the islands, where the birds are actually eating plastic. Yeah. So we are definitely affecting environment. We don't want to sink, we want to go on. We need to be aware.
Quick on good. Last week, I think it was on 60 Minutes, they were talking about the oysters and what we're doing to the shorelines, and of course I think it's originated in New York, and New York is in real trouble, and so are many of the other eastern cities of this country.
I think we have brought these things on us.
Yeah, we're trying to reestablish that, but it seems like we need to focus more on natural things, is what you're telling us about.
What I wanted to say is that we have brought about these effects. Perhaps we weren't aware as to what we were doing, but as we become aware of what we are doing, we need to make remedies so that nature will be beneficent to us and not penalize us for not taking care of it. Where would we abide if our earth wasn't here, is what we need to ask. Our earth is our home. We need to take good care of it so that it can take care of us in its return. If you have no other questions, then we'll close it right here. Thank you.